Welcome to our LIO project webinar series. LIO, or Legal Innovation and Operations, is a project run by the Corporate Legal Ops Consortium, recognizing thought leaders in the legal industry who are breaking the boundaries on the business of law by innovating how we add value to clients or our internal stakeholders. I'm Jennifer McCarran. I'm on the board of directors of the Corporate Legal Ops Consortium, and I also lead the legal ops function at Netflix. Today, we're recognizing the Kelley Drye law firm, a firm based in New York City, for their thought leadership. I'm joined by Judy Flournoy, Chief Information Officer, and we'll be talking with Judy more about how Kelley Drye innovated a claims management process for one of their clients, specifically using a bespoke technology. Hi, Judy.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm doing quite well, thank you.
Can you give us an overview, Judy, of the problem that Kelley Drye set out to solve and a bit about the solution?
Absolutely. So Dana Kane, who heads up the Meta Advisors group, had presented to us during an empathy interview the challenge she was facing around the collection of data and using Excel spreadsheets to manage that data in the claims process in bankruptcy trustee work. And so through that initial empathy interview, we developed with her assistance a database system that is now being used by Meta to manage their claims and all the W-9 information.
So it sounds like you took the client from a complete jump off of a manual spreadsheet process to a first of its kind tech solution for this process. Can you touch on the impact of the tool in so much as how did you guys approach the measurement of the impact? In legal operations and adding value, we're always trying to measure this. And so I like to start the combo there.
So interestingly enough, the Meta group itself, the work that we do for them is all on a fixed fee basis. So it's a bit difficult to identify either by fee basis or profitability, the real impact of the work that we've done on their behalf. What I would suggest though is that the real impact was on Dana and the work that she and her team are responsible for doing, and the sense that they had that we were listening to them and understanding a pain and a frustration point, and the willingness that we had as a firm to partner with them to produce a system that would actually make the work much easier and more efficient for them to do.
Yeah, streamlining and efficiency, it counts. It counts as impact, but we know sometimes it is hard to quantify. In terms of any other metrics in monitoring the matter ongoing, are you able to present with the client things like reduction in legal fees or overall year over year improving fee prediction?
So what Dana would tell you is that her realization rate has significantly increased because of the reduction in the amount of administrative work that she does related to Meta. And so it's really on her side where the real benefit has been realized. For us as the law firm serving her as a client, our benefit realization has really been around the increased, if you will, stickiness of the relationship with the client in terms of our empathy toward them and understanding what their needs were and our willingness to partner with them on a project like this.
I love the repeat mentioning of empathy and how that is coming more and more into our common parlance in business environments when it comes to understanding users, understanding your client needs. And for me, understanding the user experience involves a whole lot of empathy in there to make that match. How do you approach tracking your user experience, the user experience of the product, and manage that?
So there's a couple things that we do. So first of all, we sat with Dana early on and went through her process and all of the people that were involved in that process on a daily basis, from collecting the data in a number of Excel workbooks that came from different sources, talking about the collection of PII and W-9 information, security concerns around that, the process of then taking the information and analyzing it so that they could handle the claims process, and then looking at that from her perspective and how there were a number of what I would call friction points that she would face on any given day around doing any of that work. And so what we look at now in our conversations with Dana, and she would surely tell you, is that a lot of those friction points that existed previously no longer exist. And so they're much more equipped, or better equipped, if you will, to more quickly analyze the data after they've received it and respond. And also, one of the pain points they had was in the older environment before they had the system that we produced for them, is all of the W-9 information was handled through snail mail. And so they would get a W-9 back from a claimant. They would have to review that. If the W-9 hadn't been completed correctly, they would have to write a letter, put the letter and the rejected W-9 in snail mail, send it back to the claimant, and then wait for the claimant to send it back to them. And so all that now is handled online. And it's very easy for them to quickly identify whether or not a W-9 doesn't have the correct information. They can online then reject it, and then the claimant gets a notice that it's been rejected and why it's been rejected. So it never actually leaves that system. It never has to be handled in snail mail. So it's much faster. And again, Dana would tell you that it just has completely changed the process for them and made it significantly more efficient and obviously more secure with respect to the PII data.
So the product is live. The client is using the product. How do you manage that product ongoing? Is there a living roadmap? Are you still a part of the engagement? And if so, are there any upcoming features or improvements that you can speak to?
So we are still part of the engagement. We own the product essentially, right? So it's an outcome of something that we did, a derivative of our work. So we own it. The client doesn't own it. In terms of next steps or next phases for Meta, our next step is to make it possible for them to cut the distribution checks right out of that system. So currently they have a bit of a disjointed, if you will, process where they manage all the data inside of the Meta system that we built for them, but they manage the claimant check distribution piece of that in QuickBooks. And so our goal is to take that next phase, which is to be able to do the distributions right out of Meta into its own system, its own funds distribution system, which may be a combination of both hard copy checks and or electronic funds distribution.
So scoping more of the downstream process taking place external to this solution into and managed by this solution to streamline.
Exactly.
Can you share from your experience in design thinking in that framework, which has so many tools, what's one that is your go-to, a critical tool that Kelley Drye goes to?
So I would suggest that we use a couple of different approaches, but fundamentally rooted in design thinking concepts. So as we discussed already, the empathy interview is key. The next is the iterative process of understanding who the focus is, who are the organizational roles that need to be looked at, who are the people that are involved, and then being able to build a prototype and then being able to test that. And so it's very important to either have a toolkit that you can do that on your own, or to have a development partner that we were lucky enough to have for this, who could quickly spin up a system, a prototype system, reflect that back to Dana and her team, and then have Dana and her team say, that's great, but here's, these are a few other things that we would like to see in this. So I would suggest that it's a combination of the toolkit, the development toolkit, the developers themselves in terms of their ability to understand the outcomes that you're looking for, a project manager who's well-skilled in project management and facilitation of communication, which is really important, a willing partner in your development process. In our case, that was Dana of Meta, who was our willing partner. Those are all key pieces in the design process.
I'm sold. It's really innovative in itself to use this approach in legal.
And it can be fun because some of the tools that you use during that process are things like colored Post-it notes and flip charts and colored markers, and you ask people to draw and be creative in thinking about it. So it's not I don't consider it a burden, if you will, for lack of a better word, to go through that process if you're making it something that can be enjoyable.
Well, I thank you, Judy, for joining us today and speaking on this great innovative project, design thinking framework and empathy interviews. We look forward to hearing more from you in the future from Kelley Drye, but please stay in touch and congrats on your recognition.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate the opportunity and appreciate the conversation, Jen. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
Hello, I'm Kate Stoddard, Chief Marketing Officer at Kelley Drye & Warren, and a member of the firm's Client Service and Innovation Committee. Our client, Meta Advisor's old process of managing bankruptcy claims was time-consuming and vulnerable to human error. Originating through an empathy interview in Kelley Drye's Innovation Lab, the firm was able to identify a solution and develop an online database that allows Meta Advisors an easier way to process bankruptcy claims as a post-confirmation trustee. I'd like to welcome Dana Kane, Chief Compliance Officer of Meta Advisors, Bob Lee Hain, Partner at Kelley Drye and Chair of the firm's Client Service and Innovation Committee, and Judy Flournoy, Kelley Drye's Chief Information Officer. Welcome. Bob, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about your client, Meta Advisors, and what they do.
Thanks, Kate. So Meta Advisors derives its name from the word change. In the bankruptcy context, it's really about what has happened after the bankruptcy change, whether the company was reorganized or sold as a going concern or liquidated. At the end of every bankruptcy case, there are large numbers of claims from people who are owed money by the debtor, and there may be other trust assets that need to be pursued or liquidated. Meta Advisors deals with all those issues. It has to interface with the creditors, and it has to interface with claims agents. It has a trustee that runs it, that's Meta and Dana, and it has outside counsel, and sometimes several firms, as well as accountants. In a nutshell, that's what Meta does.
Thanks, Bob. Dana, unwieldy spreadsheets, inconsistent data, duplicate efforts. As CCO of Meta Advisors, tell us briefly about your old process of reconciling bankruptcy claims and the challenges that inspired this project.
Thanks, Kate. As Bob mentioned, we are the trustee in many post-confirmation bankruptcy estates. And what we do is we manage the claims reconciliation and distribution process. So there are thousands of rows of data that go into that effort. We will get a spreadsheet from a claims agent and an info download, if you will, that we then import into our NetDocs system. And we use that data for many different reasons. We will use that data to collect W-9s and W-8s, which are tax reporting information that is necessary in order for us to make a distribution. And then we will also work with outside counsel to reconcile the claims from asserted status to maybe disputed status to an allowed status, which will then enable us to pay people. And at any given point within the firm, even within Meta, there might be 2 or 3 people manipulating and sorting data. And then you send those spreadsheets to tax advisors who will use it for one purpose and outside counsel who will use it for another. And they may be sorting the data different ways. They may grab the wrong rows and grab the wrong columns, so the data gets mismatched from one point to another. They also may be working on one version where I'm working on another, and the tax advisors are working on a third. And what you end up with is having to input the same information several different times to make sure you get everybody back on the same page. It was unwieldy, as you put it. That's a great term, and it was inefficient, and that's putting it very mildly.
From the point of view of both an outside counsel, which I've represented Meta and other liquidating trustees, and also of counsel to a creditor that is awaiting a distribution or going through the claims reconciliation process, the entire process of waiting for a bankruptcy trustee to reconcile claims and make distributions can be unbelievably cumbersome and frustrating in the past. And it's also very frustrating when you find out as counsel to a trustee that the data you've been working with or the accountants have been working with is not the same data that you were dealing with before.
Judy, let me toss it to you. Kelley Drye uncovered the pain point that Bob and Dana just described through a design thinking workshop with the firm's innovation lab. What was that process like?
So interesting that this comes up because the firm had sponsored an innovation lab. We then sought to look for ways to bring innovation to client service. And as part of that, we held a design thinking event, which was preceded by first what were known as empathy interviews with a number of the attorneys in different practice areas. And then we held a day-long workshop. During the day-long workshop, Dana had presented her pain point around managing all of these Excel workbooks and different kinds of information and coming and going. And the entire group decided that Dana's problem that was presented during the empathy interview would be the project that we would take on.
And once the Innovation Lab uncovered this client challenge, how did you go about designing and building the Meta Claims website, and what outputs did you deliver along the way?
So from the workshop, we achieved the identification of the design requirements. So basically the definition of what was needed to both handle the information and process the information. That process that we undertook included a number of meetings that Dana helped lead the discussion with her team around the various ways in which they were handling the data, the way that the data came in, and any concerns they had about security. From that point, we hired a project manager. The project manager developed a request for proposal. That request for proposal was sent out to a number of third-party development shops. That we then identified 4 of those development shops and had them come in and meet with us. And we chose one of those development shops to take on the project.
Dana, now that the site has launched, talk about some of the efficiencies you've seen and how your processes will improve.
No longer do we have to accept W-9s the way we did way back when, which was by either email or fax. That's no longer done, as that is an insecure way of receiving the data. So more recently, we had switched to either uploading to a secure website that we maintain or physically mailing in those forms. The downside with that, obviously, is that we get the form and then someone has to key in all the data to get it into Excel. And as you can imagine, several different people doing that, thousands of forms prone to human error. So this interface will allow people to take their form, upload it directly to the Meta website, and there will be an interactive set of fields where they can key in the data themselves.
Bob, what has been the greatest impact that the bankruptcy claims site has made for your client?
Kate, what we've seen is increased efficiency in time spent by our professionals and the accountants working on these matters. We've seen much greater accuracy in terms of the ability to reconcile and the data being closer to where it should be when it first gets to our attorneys and accountants. We've seen much more timely follow-up, and we've seen much less need for additional follow-up, which allows the trust to facilitate much more prompt distributions to creditors. The goal in a bankruptcy case is to minimize the exposure and maximize the return to unsecured creditors. And what the Meta site does is it gets more money to the creditors as quickly as possible. That's a win.
Sure is. And what potential do you see for this site and other projects within the Client Service and Innovation Committee to impact other clients?
The beauty of the Meta project was that we very quickly realized that we could use the technology and the architecture that the Meta site was developed with to build out master status reports for several other practice groups. We're able to use much of the same architecture and build out a status reporting platform where attorneys at Kelley Drye can interface with professionals and attorneys at the clients, both sides interfacing with the database, updating the information in real time, and providing master status reports that are done more efficiently with greater accuracy and less need for additional follow-ups and less direct follow-up on both parts. Again, a complete win where you have greater efficiency, greater accuracy, and more timely and prompt follow-up.
Well, it's fantastic to see what originated in an empathy type conversation at a workshop a couple of years ago has now evolved into a process that really changes the way you do things at Meta. Dana, thank you for sharing your pain point and allowing Kelley Drye to work with you on a solution. And thank you all for your time today.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.